Generative AI is unlike any technology that has come before. It's swiftly disrupting business and society, forcing leaders to rethink their assumptions, their plans, and strategies in real time. Worldwide Technology is here to help, and you are watching part 2 of our 2-part research series covering a guide for CEOs to accelerate AI excitement and adoption. Now, as always, this document is worth reading in itself, and we're mainly adding color to it as we speak with Tim Brooks, Managing Director for AI Solution Development at WWT.
I serve as Managing Director of AI Solution Development for Worldwide Services Organization.
And Brent Collins, AVP with Global Solutions and Architectures.
I sit on our Global Solutions teams. I spend a little bit more time top of the funnel. Probably a little bit better way to describe it is I get ourselves into deep water and Tim helps us get out.
You can watch part 1 as a replay anytime, right away. But my name is Rob Boyd. It's time for part 2. Determining whether to buy a vendor-owned AI model or build your own foundational model, well, this seems like a really big decision. Third-party models have the advantage of quick startups. You can lean on the vendors, their AI expertise, and pre-built solutions. But this also leaves you with limited control to customize it for your own brand or your unique differentiating needs. So that's my little intro to the build versus buy dilemma faced by, I think, quite a few of our customers. What's been your experience?
One of the critical things that we're asked all the time is, there's so much of this that's available, either in closed systems. So example well-known, of course, is OpenAI and its partnership with Microsoft, right? That's a closed AI system that you can customize it, but you're sort of paying for the use of that model. And then there's open source, and you can put guardrails and customize open source. I'm talking about large language models now, to a great degree and make them successful. Brent mentioned it, and I'll mention it again. Data and the quality of your data and how well curated it is, and does it support artificial intelligence, are things that we've dealt with for 10 years. So we're able to advise our customers on that. But at a CEO level, one of those fundamental decisions is, should we buy an AI product, right, and then use it or customize it, or should we build our own? And this decision comes down to a couple of things, and I think of it as a bit of a matrix, right? And that is it core IP to our organization? Is it our secret sauce? Is it something that is absolutely critical to our success and gives us a competitive difference in the market? So I use an example. This is a public one. Bloomberg and Bloomberg GPT, for example. Bloomberg has created its own foundational model. Its stock in trade is financial information and the flow of that information and how it is accessed by its subscribers. That is core IP. Made sense for them to build their own foundational model. Cost tens of millions of dollars, but makes perfect sense in terms of the return on investment. If you are meanwhile contemplating, should we have some sort of AI that helps streamline our HR operations? Most of the time, that's buy a solution. That's probably not, for most organizations, core IP. That is important. And if we can optimize that and help select better candidates, give better offers, shorten the decision time for our HR people and for the candidates, those are all good things, but that's probably not core IP. And then the other part of that matrix is, what's my data quality? If Bloomberg GPT, for example, if using that example, if Bloomberg's data quality wasn't excellent, and I do know that it is excellent, then they could not have built a successful foundational model. On the other hand, if your data quality and your own data maturity as an organization is not yet there, then that may be something to consider. Do we partner with another organization? Do we seek to customize it? And what are these initiatives that we do? So this is how you help decide what not to do out of all the use cases that came up and which to execute on. And then it just comes down to what's foundational, what do we invest in later, what does that roadmap look like?
Yeah, what not to do. So often that is the shorter list to work from. So good stuff. So how does WWT handle these particular issues?
We have a concept internally called practical AI, which you'd expect from a company from the Midwest. But the concept of practical AI is we don't need to custom build everything from the ground up everywhere. So give you an example, we have something called WWT GPT internally that we use. It's our own chatbot that's democratizing data worldwide. we're using an off-the-shelf foundational model, and then we're pairing that with our own data. And so it's allowing us to move fast, and it's allowing us to move fast and get an outcome without investing in, Tim had mentioned Bloomberg, foundational model built and trained from the ground up. We used the best that was off the shelf, and then we started to pair that with our own data so we could move fast and get the return we wanted. Most customers in this space are going to do the same thing, which is cultivate your use cases, prioritize those use cases, and then you kind of look at them for what they are and you go, is there something off the shelf that I can use? Do I need to customize that, or do I need to start brand new custom?
Now, you also had a framing device for kind of helping clients think through these decisions.
Stealing from one of my coworkers here, he has this concept of a contractor versus an employee and applies that to AI. So if you think about like a foundational model, whether it's GPT, Claude, Bard, something like that, that's off the shelf, that's a little bit like a contractor coming into your organization. It knows a little bit about your organization. It can add some significant value, but it's really tactical. As you start to look at what we did here internally, which is, okay, I'm going to pair GPT with my own data. Now you start to look at it through the concept or the lens of an employee. If you want to take the analogy there, your employees know a lot about your organization. They have intimate tribal knowledge through your organization, and they can start to use the advantages of that GPT or generative front end with your own data. All of a sudden, that AI becomes an employee of the company. And I think that's where there's kind of this pendulum, if you will, that, or maybe a spectrum that customers are looking at, which is maybe that's okay to start with a contractor, but as soon as I start to introduce my own data with that and start to couple best of breed off the shelf with some customization and my own data, you start to move from that, contractor into an employee, and you start to have outsized returns when you start to do that. So you might just kick the tires, if you will, over here, and then you kind of move through that process of customization, own data, and then maximizing output. So there's some things there for CEOs to consider as they get started.
Well, how early do these decisions need to be made? What kind of things should be done first?
I'd say that you want to have guidelines in place and then be prepared to iterate and adapt to the reality that you encounter. I think you want to have certainly risk management policies, like what is, there's just not the reward compared to the risk of a certain use case, for example, of artificial intelligence. I classically could use the example, if I was going to have a gambling weekend in Vegas, I'd be okay with a 60% confidence rating on my model because I'd still do well. But if someone's going to do neurosurgery on me, I want 99.999% accuracy that, what they're doing has a great chance of succeeding. These are different confidence levels for what we do. Autonomous driving, for example. Autonomous driving, we want really, really high levels of success, right? But we'll tolerate humans when we get on the highway, because we've all been on the highway and we've seen reckless drivers, distracted drivers, drivers speeding, drivers doing all sorts of things, and we still tolerate that, right? We have a higher tolerance for human failure than we do for machine failure. That's been proven in studies. Daniel Kahneman, the famous author of Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow, has said the same thing in various interviews. So knowing that going in, we're going to have a really high confidence level in the models, and we're going to have to build trust in it. So you mentioned education and adoption. This trust is awarded over time to the technology, and it can be embraced by humans. You want to make sure that the expectations are aligned. I mean, so this is all, how do we think about this in advance so that we can be successful? So let me give you an example. Brent mentioned WWT GPT. At first, this was tuned and curated and done by expert users before it was more widely released. And now we're continuing to factor human interaction with WWT GPT back into the model by continually refining and retraining it. So you're going to have to be prepared to do that. This is not like instituting an ERP where it's like, okay, we started, now we're done, and the ERP is going. This is a continual, product life cycle, right? Just like, you've got, some cereal on the marketplace. You're constantly, going to be the product manager of it. You're going to be the product manager of your, AI initiative, because it's always learning, it's always moving, it's always changing. Hopefully it's changing for the better, but it's your job to embrace that and keep it in its lane.
Well, we talked about the importance of a mature data strategy. So I want to pull up another quote. Without quality data, Gen AI simply cannot live up to its promise. The reason is simple. Gen AI models do not understand data. They're just tools to be able to predict the most likely output as dictated by the massive amounts of data they consume. Your data maturity needs to be in place before making any architectural changes, I would assume. But let's talk about that. How important is the architecture in support of these changes?
Yeah, I think when we look at it, we're going to meet customers where they're at. And I think where their data is super important to that deployment option conversation. If I've already got my data, my applications in the cloud, there's no reason to do something unnatural and start to put it into your own data center. The counterpoint to that is if I have most of my data on premises or in a colo, I'm going to bring the AI to where that data is. It's easier for me to do it. It's probably more cost effective, and it allows me to move a lot faster. Now, what we're finding with customers, and even with customers moving into the cloud, and we work with a lot of the cloud providers as well, is AI is not a typical application that you would deploy. So every customer that we interact with is going to have to rethink their own data center, whether that's a cloud provider providing services or it's an enterprise customer with their own data center. They're going to need more to pull more power into their data center itself. They're going to need to figure out how to distribute that power to the racks. Once they get it there, these applications, because it's running so hot, you're going to need to figure out how to cool it. So a typical rack is designed today for about 10 to 17 kilowatts, for example. A typical rack with AI is going to probably exceed 100 kilowatts in the future. So just to give you a dimension of like today, it might be here, but it's 5x that in the future to accommodate it. So before we used to think about it in terms of probably the space that equipment would be in, and it's all about the same amount of space. Now we have situations where customers are deploying this in their own data centers and they're at 50% space capacity and 100% power capacity. So we really need to redesign all of these things, whether it's my own data center or whether it's a cloud provider providing it as a service to a customer. Every one of them is going to have to develop a different profile for how that data center operates. So it's a great time to do it, to your point. But there's also other considerations, which is, maybe I've put off, refreshing my other things that are in my data center, not AI at all. But if I can make those things more efficient, I can create more space, more power headroom, more space headroom for AI applications that are coming in. So there's all sorts of things that people want to consider when they say, deploy it here or deploy it there. But there's no free lunch no matter where you're at.
It makes me think about how the cost of a transformation like this, especially when it comes to, how is it allocated? How is it shared?
So if you're a hyperscaler, think any of the public clouds, you're accustomed to a model where you know how to charge your customer back for the resources they're using. So you can turn on and off a workload, you've got a charge back, scheme in place. And one might say that the innovation of the clouds was learning how to meter their usage, right? So the clouds existed, but we learned how to meter and charge back to customers what they were using based upon their usage, thus elasticity. Large data center, or companies that have large data centers are now dealing with that, and it's new to many of them. It's like, how do we charge back for this now shared resources of all these GPUs that are in these racks doing artificial intelligence? How long is the model going to require training? What are the tools and middleware it's going to need? What are the frameworks that are going to be required to do it? And then how do I turn that on and off and get the other person's workload up there? And as this expands over hundreds of use cases and many very enthusiastic and hungry users and data scientists that want to build and train their own models, this suddenly becomes a little more complex than managing, the data center of 4 years ago. And we've been assisting organizations with that for a while. So that's part of, let's just call it a consequence of CEO that will trickle down to the CTO and people in the organization to execute. That's non-trivial. in terms of the change to how they work. And that's a significant, we're finding a significant challenge for many of them. And they're working on it, and we're helping. But it's something that, you can't wave the magic wand from the C-level and think, okay, suddenly we're going to have the right infrastructure for AI. There's a whole lot of stuff that needs to come together to give you that foundation with infrastructure.
Another area that I hope nobody's overlooking, and I mean, I know you guys aren't, let's talk about security. AI is very different in this area as well, correct?
I think there's two types of security that when we talk about it, there's AI for security, and then there's security for AI. And yeah, and I think the AI for security is, embedding AI to do it. And then there's also the aspect of typical that we do with every other application, which is how do I actually secure AI from, the typical things, malicious code injection, people getting in, understanding what bad actors could do if they are in there. It could be internal people as well. So there's all sorts of things that we want to take advantage of when it comes to security for AI, as well as AI for security, if that makes sense. So like if I'm going down the path of AI for security, I might be talking about how people are using AI, bad actors might be using AI to, attack, corporations, things like that. And then there's security for AI, which is I want to make sure that nobody gets in, messes with my model, so I'm producing bad results. So there's all sorts of things that fit into that.
I know that the phishing attacks I have received in the last 6 months are 10x more convincing than the phishing attempts from previous generation.
I miss being able to see the English was bad and the phrasing was awkward because, well, now it's all perfect. Very, very crafty.
They're very, very crafty now. And then you add to it deep fakes of voice, deep fakes of images. I mean, I've really got to trust through behaviors that I don't get a message from a CFO or CEO in my organization, wherever I may be, that doesn't convince me to do something that I otherwise might not do, right? So it's almost like I'm going to need two-factor authentication of human commands now, right? I'm going to need to know not just that my CEO said, send this wire to this account, right? But I want two-factor authentication of humans within my organization now because of the sophistication of the phishing attacks and of deep fakes. So the Hong Kong banker who transferred, I think it was 25 million is a great example of that, right? I mean, it was like a deep fake of a CFO's voice or something. And it was so good that he's like, sure, he left me a voicemail to do this. I'm going to go do it.
Do you believe that executives grasp the distinct risks associated with AI to effectively categorize and respond to them appropriately?
Rob, I think in my conversations, I think they do. And it is filling them with purpose to get it under control. And I do think that is a good, governor on how fast organizations can move is considering the security implications of what they're doing, and also using AI, as Brent mentioned, to enhance security. So there are AI solutions now, and WWT has built one of its own that help protect networks from security threats and attacks. And if you're a large, telecommunications organization, a carrier, if you're a large bank, I mean, think about the criticality of networks to most large global organizations transacting through customers, payment processors. I mean, all sorts of folks. Your network is critical to your success. It needs to be maintained securely. To do that, now there are AI-powered applications and solutions that can give real-time anomaly detection, that can actually, war game threats against your network and look for weak spots so you can bolster them up. So that's really a great use of AI to enhance your security posture. But yeah, I do think they do understand it. That's the secure, will we be trying to penetrate it part of it, or will our IP leak out of the organization part? That's been a part of discussions for at least the last year with every one of the executive level conversations I've had.
I feel like we've seen this one before, but how much of an issue is shadow AI?
Yeah, I think we're kind of following the same path as cloud, and you called out before. We saw shadow IT, if you will, in the cloud, and we're also seeing shadow AI as well. I think that most executives that I deal with are very concerned about it. It's a little bit different than cloud, to the point we just mentioned earlier, which is there are things that you can do with AI that are malicious. There's things that it exposes you to at an organizational level. So I think tying back into the security aspect of this, most of the executives that I deal with are restricting access in some form or fashion to AI for good reason, right? And especially, you don't want your own data to come out and be exposed through, public tools. So you want a way to keep your own data private. And every time you put in there, like, hey, I'm going to respond to an RFP, but I'm going to use ChatGPT or Claude to do it. There's data that's in there that could be your data. It could be your customer's data. There's all sorts of reasons why you need to be mindful of that. I think the way I like to think about it, both on the pro and the con side, is that AI plus human equals whatever you're trying to do. It's not going to be AI acting alone. I think contextualizing communications is going to be really important. The other thing that I think is really foundational is trust, both organizational trust, but also personal trust with the people you're working with. You can solve some of this with technology, but we all know each other, for example. And so if Tim sends me a note and says, hey, I want you to do something, I'm going to take that into account, that I trust Tim, I know Tim. There's always going to be malicious things that could happen where somebody spoofs Tim. But if Tim asks me to do something that I know that Tim would never ask me to do, I'll pick up the phone and call him, right? And I think the technology will take you so far, but I do think there's a human element around trust. There's also the element of we're going to have to pair together with AI to do whatever we want to do. It could be very positive that we're working on it, but it could be I'm in a security organization or a NOC trying to prevent an attack. If I'm going human against AI plus human, I'm probably going to lose that equation. I need to be human plus AI to defend myself against human plus AI. So those are some things that we typically advise organizations to be cognizant of. So there's the shadow AI portion of this, but there's also the concept of trust, and there's also the concept of we need to look at this not just AI versus AI. It's going to be a human plus AI versus a human plus AI on both sides of the coin.
We've got a pretty deep cybersecurity consulting organization, several with backgrounds in the U.S. intelligence community that help our customers determine what is the appropriate security posture for various workloads for the organization writ large. What does that look like? So I do think that positions us well and uniquely, by the way, to advise our customers on the implications of AI for security, as well as the security threats posed by bad actors using AI. We're in a unique and an enviable position in that regard.
All right, there is one area that I do want to cover before we run out of time, and despite perhaps reinforcing a few of the things that we've said already, I think this will be a great recap for both parts 1 and 2 with our CEO guide to AI. I really like the idea of this research helping me avoid the avoidable stuff. So with that in mind, let's quickly run through 8 pitfalls to avoid. We'll start, of course, with pitfall number 1, executive focus, sponsorship, and buy-in. Brent, would you mind reinforcing this one for us?
Yeah, we did talk about it a little bit earlier, but it's so critical to have the right level of engagement in an organization. We've had companies ask us, how did you guys move so fast to go put together GPT, and how did you move so fast to do X, Y, and Z? And I think the answer is, we have board level involvement. We have a chief executive who is intimately involved, and we're able to move really fast, but we're also able to move with purpose and focus. So we got done exactly what we needed to get done versus some organizations can move fast, but in the wrong direction. And I think having a chief executive that's intimately involved, whether you're worldwide or whether you're in global finance or manufacturing, allows you to move with purpose, quickly, right direction, with all your team engaged and involved. And you're able to create outstanding outcomes when you do that. If you don't have that executive engagement, you may have one part of your organization going this way, another going this way. And I don't think that's productive necessarily.
Okay, pitfall number 2, keeping up with the pace of change.
Let's look at artificial intelligence as a intelligence transformation without end. And one of the things at Worldwide, I think that's helpful to us internally in remaining, a step with the pace of change is we have a core value at Worldwide called passion for learning. And one of the things that all WWT employees are asked to embrace is technology is ever evolving and changing. That's the nature of it. Don't get stuck in a rut. Always be learning what is the next thing and be prepared to advise customers on that. So let's take that and let's then take that to our customers and apply it. Your models are going to continue to learn and act, upon the information that they have absorbed through what's called inference, right? And sometimes, and most of the time, that's great. But sometimes that can cause those models to drift from purpose. So a way to look at it, in terms of staying up with, trends and making sure that your models are performing, is that the models you're using, particularly in generative AI, are some of the smartest interns you've ever hired. Great education, multilingual, can solve all sorts of problems, great analytical reasoning, but they know nothing about your company. What you're customizing them to do is to learn about your company, how you make decisions, the voice you speak in, the style you have, the learnings that you've already achieved within the organization. You want to keep that model on mission, just like you do an employee. So you can hire that great employee, but you can continue to train them, coach them, monitor them, keep them, moving in the right direction, encouraging them. That's what you'll need to do with, in particular, with generative AI. And if you're doing that, there's a team of individuals in your organization that should be responsible for curating the models, but then all of us are responsible for, as we use the model, to continue to give feedback on how they're doing, if they can be improved. All of that needs to go on within an organization. That's how you remain current.
Pitfall number 3, unrealistic expectations. I mean, this does feel relevant in these overhyped times.
Well,
no?
I'd say there's unrealistic expectations in terms of, just what it sounds like, which is I think this is going to solve world hunger. You need to rein in the expectations a little bit. But I think really what I would advise a CEO to take a look at is how do I maintain focus around critical path? So I can get easily distracted with 1,000 use cases. And by the way, all 1,000 of those matter to the people that develop those use cases. What we need to do, though, is stay focused on a core set of use cases that we know can drive measurable impact and maybe unmeasurable innovation in an organization. And I think if you stay focused, you get to stay a little bit closer to realistic expectations as you kind of move through there. This isn't going to be something that's going to come in and transform everything overnight, but it's going to transform, if you do it the right way with focus, the core critical path things that you need to get done will help you transform your organization, transform your company relative to the market and your competition, and deliver outsized results. So I think I like to think about unrealistic, but drive it back to the focus is going to help you get to the outcomes and get to the expectation that you want.
All right, we covered this one before, of course, but Tim, can you reinforce pitfall number 4, these buy or build decisions?
As you grow in your confidence and in your skills within the organization and upskilling, your workforce and using AI, you may start by buying, but you want to iterate toward building, knowing your own core IP, having data quality and data readiness in order to do it. That's your differential advantage. That will help you in terms of both competitor threats as well as maybe, creating new products, new services that the marketplace will then, come to you as opposed to coming to someone else. So have that maybe as your goal is to what can we build that will give us unique advantage in the marketplace. Although you may start with buy, just, kicking the tires, getting started, making some cultural shifts, having some organizational change. Keep in mind that ultimately you probably want to build something of your own that's going to create advantage in the marketplace for yourself.
That's great. I still like the learn from existing models so you can make smarter choices about what needs to be brought in-house, beforehand. Use them as a learning thing. Brent, pitfall number 5, business and IT integration?
Yeah, I would say it's probably more than just business and IT, but those are the two big ones that need to interact. So you may have a business with expectations for what they want to accomplish. And you have IT or technology organizations, could be cloud, could be IT, other security, that have different expectations. So getting those people in the room, understanding one, what we want to do, but also what's possible today, and getting those people aligned. We talked about it earlier, which, we talked a lot about, power cooling, some of those things in IT, but it could be, where do I deploy these things for maximum impact? How do I build technology or buy technology that empowers those use cases? So getting everybody on the same page, which is, this is the art of the possible. And I try to translate that into what I call art of the probable, which is, I need to align different parts of my organization to get to probable and then get to outcome. So I think whether it's risk and legal compliance, those organizations, it could be security, it could be IT, it could be the business, it could be executives. All of those people need to be rowing in the same direction to get the outcomes that we want in AI.
All right, here's a fun one. Pitfall number 6, regulatory compliance. This is a dynamic area right now, of course, and it needs to be. But what's important here, Tim?
Let's look at it this way. If you're in an industry that's already regulated, so think finance, banking, healthcare, you're accustomed to regulatory, these things called MRAs, or matters requiring attention, and you have either people who drop everything and then go back and provide the information needed. Something that's new to many organizations is AI. In the White House back in October announced some broad guidelines for departmental implementation. So let's say you're the FCC or the FDA or another regulatory body. You now will also be regulating artificial intelligence and how it's used in companies in your industry. And there's other sorts of AI regulation already in Europe. You see robust AI regulation as part of what's about to be adopted by the European Parliament. I think that's the current state of it, but as of this recording. But regulation is now upon you for AI. Now, coming up with AI risk management is something that responsible AI, which is woven into every part of what we do at Worldwide, we weave it in because we know, one, it's the right thing to do, but secondly, you need a means of reporting back to regulators should they ask about how that model was built. How many training iterations did it go through? What's the data that supports it? And you don't want to, have things like selection bias in your data, right? These are all sorts of things to factor in. Many organizations aren't ready for this. It's new to them. So AI risk management, or the regulatory environment, is something to prepare for. And it's better to start preparing now than wait until a regulator actually asks you to do it, and then your organization is going to have to drop things. The implications of this are, you need a culture that embraces ML ops, or machine learning operations is what it's called. Think of it as DevOps for AI, right? And this is something that is, I think, more and more is becoming understood and important to organizations. Worldwide's been doing that for 5 years. We've got a whole body of publications and work product on what we've done in that area. So that's really advantageous for us in our own AI, as well as for our customers who need to suddenly now move into, how am I going to be compliant with regulation, particularly if you have any AI apps that are touching consumers. Then you're going to need to be mindful of the regulatory environment.
A lot of our industries are unregulated today in this form or fashion. It's super important to be on the front edge of that versus having a government come back and dictate to you what you need to go do.
Yeah.
So I think, the example I would give you is, an airline was using somebody was using a chatbot with an airline. They're now on the hook for what that chatbot recommended. So this just played out in the courts in Canada. We don't want organizations that we work with to have to play out their regulatory considerations in court. We'd rather have them be proactive in influencing that versus the other way around. So whether it's that or other things that we work with in the enterprise, I think I'd rather see organizations get on the front foot than be regulated and go, that doesn't make any sense for me. So get involved, be proactive, be on the front foot.
I'll give a little futurist forecast here. There are nations already that have a sovereign claim to the data within that nation and with their citizens. So the sovereignty of data is already established in many countries. GDPR in Europe, for example, is somewhat data sovereignty, but it's personal data privacy and protection. At some moment, if and when AI does some bad stuff or used by humans in a bad way, the push for data sovereignty and a balkanization of data across different, call them governments, call them countries, nations, even states. We've already seen some of that in the United States, states trying to, wall off technology from accessing its citizens. I think there'll be, some move in that direction. Proactively, if you've got policies and regulation ahead of that, and you're a global organization, you're in a better position to address should that happen, right? But it's just human nature when something bad happens. The political factors being what they are, people want to wall off the contagion, the virus, protect its citizens, whatever. Right. And so when we've seen this time and again in history, and we've seen it with things like the internet and the Great Firewall of China, right? And you see it with data sovereignty in other nations. I do think that having the right regulatory preparedness within your organization will help with whatever comes about in that regard.
I like the proactive call out there. So let's cover the last two together, as we've already started talking about them already. Pitfall number 7, security risk awareness, and number 8, organizational risk awareness.
I do think there's a technology consideration when it comes to security. And security is not just technology, but when we think about it, we talked a little bit about maybe it's a red team from a malicious actor coming after you. There are security considerations informed by technology that can help protect your organization from those type of things from happening. So when I think of security, maybe I think about it through the lens of traditional technology organizations and security. There's also physical security and other types of security there as well. When I think about risk and compliance, I think about it through the lens of governance and things of that nature. And Tim hit on a lot of those that are really good. One thing we haven't talked a lot about, though, around risk and compliance that can save you a little bit is if you use a traditional, off-the-shelf GPT engine today, a lot of times it's not citing sources. So it's really difficult to go, where did this information come from? How do I protect myself from the outcome or the output of that tool? When we haven't talked about retrieval augmented generation or connecting data to those models yet. We'll probably talk about that in the next segment. But the advantages of doing that is, one, it's your data, and two, it usually cites its sources when it's using RAG. So that gives you the advantage of, if you have a bad result come out and it cites its sources, you can take a look at the sources and go, oh, well, that's a bad source. I'm going to take that out. So it just makes it easier from a risk and compliance perspective when you're getting that outcome to take a look at where it came from. So there's some of those things that come in. But yeah, when it comes to governance, when it comes to security, there's a couple different things, in my mind at least, that are important to consider. But yeah, one might be a little bit more technology oriented, not always, but a little bit. And then the other side is maybe we're getting the lawyers involved, we're getting bureaucrats involved, we're getting folks involved to look at overall governance.
Tim?
Trust matters within your organization. Size is important. So if you're a 100,000 employee organization, let's look at 1% of that organization or power users access to incredibly important information, moving money around, things like that. They need a tremendous amount of training in AI, in security, monitoring, a variety of other things involving, to make your business more secure. But for the other, let's say, certainly 80%, maybe 99% of your organization, that posture and that training needs to be enough for them to continue to do their job and then trust in the AI they're using.
Yeah.
And that's a way that, we found success with. There's much more nuance to it than what I'm describing, but essentially, this stuff works well if it's got the right guardrails. I'll leave you with one thing, Rob, and that is in the previous age of AI, the algorithm was as important, if not more important, than the data. And the algorithms were guarded as proprietary. Today, we're looking at open source, large language models at massive scale, whose capabilities are roughly doubling every 6 months. doubling every 6 months in terms of context windows, the parameters they can use. All of this is moving incredibly fast. But what's less important now is the algorithm, because you're going to have access to it, open source in many cases. But the data, your data quality and the data it's trained on is going to be paramount. So your data strategy and viewing data as an asset of your organization becomes even more important than it has ever been.
Okay, final question is, well, how can WWT help lower the risk equation? How do you guys like to jump in? What do you suggest?
For many customers, they're beginning their AI journey, let's say, in terms of AI use case development, determining data readiness and data quality, the foundations that are critical for AI success. For worldwide, and as well as for many advanced customers that have been doing AI for years, we've got many, cycles and experience of what works, what to discard, what's a distraction, and what will, in the end, be most successful. I like to think of it as we're in a unique position to be their Sherpa in terms of helping them, in that journey, helping them climb that mountain, so to speak, to use the metaphor, because we've done it many times, and we've done it from the beginning at the bottom all the way to the top, and they will get better at it as they do it more frequently, as they onboard more use cases, as they look for value creation in their organization. We're a great way to help get started successfully and sort of de-risk part of that by bringing us in at the right moment, either with data foundations work, strategy, data science, software engineering, ML ops is a portion of this that can't be disregarded. With the regulatory environment that's either they're working in or will be coming, there's a requirement for risk avoidance and risk management. Those are all things that we've done. So that's where I see our services complementing our customers on this journey toward artificial intelligence.
All right. Well, thank you for that, Tim. I appreciate you joining us.
Rob, it's been a pleasure. Always good talking with you.
Brent, same to you as well.
What a great topic, and thanks for leading us in the topic today.
Navigating the AI landscape requires a blend of strategic foresight, practicality, and a dash of caution against the allure of every passing trend. There are advantages to being a fast follower, locking in those first mover advantages, but I want to emphasize how WWT encourages a more thoughtful and controlled approach to AI solution development with an eye towards this notion of long-term viability. Because this can feel like a really big or Herculean task, especially when you're aiming to keep your organization at the forefront of this without getting lost in the hype. But here's the good news, you're not alone in this. WWT has been delivering AI solutions since 2014, and with their expertise in managed services, cutting-edge AI labs, partnerships with giants like NVIDIA and Intel, well, WWT is the friend you need to demystify the complexities of AI adoption. So lots of additional resources to consider if you're fired up right now for more research. Don't forget to check out the full research paper itself, A Guide for CEOs to Accelerate AI Excitement and Adoption. It's a good one. It's a big read, but it's got a lot of good details in there. Hey guys, thank you so much. My name is Rob Boyd. I really appreciate you joining us. Take care.